Good morning.
Good morning.
Did everyone bring their seatbelts this morning?
Yes.
Good, because I'm going to need you to strap on, all right? I'm going to do exactly what I've been told not to do. I'm not going to focus on 2 or 3 things. I'm going to give you probably 7 or 8 to 10 things. So it's going to go quick, all right? I want to just briefly share with you some takeaways I got from Global Leadership Summit, which is a 2-day conference just with the premise of leadership and influence. And then a little bit of how I've used this. One thing I wanted to do this year was to jump in a speech last minute without any prep work, so I did this all this morning, and I'm super pumped to share with you. Alright, let's go. So the premise was everyone has influence. And it doesn't matter if you only have one client, it doesn't matter if it's just your family, it doesn't matter if it's just friends at the gym. Every single one of us has influence. And so I want to encourage you to think about, hey, what are those spheres of influence that I do have, and how am I impacting others around me for the greater good? How am I leading them to betterness, or am I leading them to worseness, which is not even a word, but now it is. All right, so the first speaker I want to highlight, Craig Groeschel. He's the main pastor for a church down in Oklahoma, biggest church in the country, I believe. I think they came up with Church TV. But he talked about a couple things, one of which was the importance of storytelling, and how stories stick, whereas facts fade. And so, as speakers, that hit home with me because you know, I want my whatever I say to be memorable, and stories actually resonate with both the logical and emotional side of our brains. So it really helps it stick. Then there was a lady named Bazoma St. John, who was a former chief executive for Uber and Apple, way up there. And she talked about the importance of putting yourself in someone else's shoes. When she was the chief executive, or one of the higher executives for Uber, she actually drove Uber car for a full day, just to understand the experience from the driver's side. Obviously their focus has been the clients, but a big part of their base is their drivers, and how do they feel? Do they feel safe, etc. So I thought that was really good. And she also talked about the importance of being yourself, and how it's people's responsibility to accept you, not your responsibility to make others accept you. So be who you are meant to be. Liz Bohannon, this is the lady that created a clothing line with the premise to help women in African countries actually get schooling and pay for education. And so she talked about how there's a learning cycle, and we think of learning sometimes in stages of, like, you start with blissful ignorance, and then you get to the top, and you can do this in your sleep, and you're comfortable. And she said at that point, someone who's really motivated by growth and challenge will actually jump back into ignorance and bliss, etc., and exchange that comfort of being an expert at something to, I want to learn something new, and constantly. So one trend I saw with all these leaders were that they might be at one company, kind of get it, help the company along, and then they were jumping into something new. And that was a huge takeaway for me, is that we're constantly always learning. So I encourage you, if you've got something, jump into something new and learn something new, like public speaking. She also talked about the importance of dreaming small. And we talk about dream big, but sometimes those big dreams we have can be fearful because we don't know where to start. She said dream something that's going to launch you and perpetuate you into action. So whatever that is, start small and go from there. She also talked about we're all average statistically. That was pretty funny. She said don't listen to your parents or grandparents. Statistically, we're all average, but we all can do something. Figure out what you can do and do it. Ben Sherwood, he was a former chairman and president of Disney and ABC television networks. He talked about it's both quality and quantity of ideas. It's not just one or the other. Walt Disney had a ton of ideas. Some were good, some were bad, but he had a lot of them as well. So it's kind of a balance of both. Again, I'm just flying through. This is a PowerPoint presentation of a lot of stuff packed into 2 days. Devon Franklin, he's a movie producer in Hollywood. And he's African American and he's a Christian. And he talks about how those 2 things are already kind of 2 notches against him in the views in that sphere of Hollywood. But he talks about don't lose your voice. It's actually our difference that makes a difference. And he talks about the more we try to conform, like he gave the example of Chips Ahoy versus, I forget, like Oreos. It wasn't Oreos, but some other cookie. Chips Ahoy is not trying to be like Oreos, and Oreos is not trying to be like Chips Ahoy. It's their difference that gives them space on that shelf, right? And we all have space on the shelf. Be different. That's what makes you different. Or yeah, your difference makes you different. Or makes a difference. Sorry. Patrick Lencioni, he's a leader a gentleman that works with leaders and CEOs for Fortune 500 companies, and he talks about there's 2 types of leaders. servant leadership, and the epitome he talked about was Jesus. And then there's also rewards-based leaders who are seeking, fame, or it could be just pleasure or whatever. They're doing things based on something they're going to get from it. And he talked about the difference in how if you are a servant leader, you're leading because the need of people around you needs you to lead, versus a rewards-based leader, you're just doing it mainly for you. And so the difference would be the fruit. Servant-based leaders would be willing to have the tough conversations because they care about the people around them mostly, and then the rewards-based leaders don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations. So he challenged us, hey, look at these 5 areas, and out of these, which ones are you good at, which ones are you not, which do you need improvement on? And then Aja Brown is the mayor of Compton. She's the youngest mayor ever, 30 years old, drastically reduced homicide rates, etc. She talked about vision is the vehicle of momentum. So it's important to define our objective, journey, milestones, and priorities. And then Chris Voss was probably my favorite. He was the head international hostage negotiator for the FBI. And he talked about how the quickest hack to fear is actually curiosity. So when we feel fearful, yes, step into it, but also be curious about it. So I realize I'm running out of time. So last thing I'm going to leave you with is what I'm doing right now in my business, and I'm actually taking mission, vision, and mantra and figuring that out. And I already have my mantra. It's hushing with integrity, which is a combination of hustling and crushing put together, right? Activity and then performance, but with integrity, humility, and honor. So I encourage you to think through what is the influence you have and how are you impacting people around you. Thank you.